Well, thank you for inviting me. First of all, I just want to say how honored I am to get a chance to speak to you guys at the Austrian Association of Snow Avalanches. It started this summer. I was emailing with Chris Hesselback about some avalanche terrain rating maps, and we began emailing, and one thing led to another, and now here I am speaking to you guys. So it's a real honor, and thanks for the introduction. Christoph, and again, this is, you mentioned it already, but I'm pretty excited to do this talk because I've always done danger scale talks and, more theoretical scientific type talks. And this one is the practice side of theory and practice mostly. So uh, I guess what I want to talk about today is really kind of show you some examples of how we do avalanche forecasting in Canada. That's going to be a little bit about some of the group that I work with. I think I'll introduce you first to the mountains in Canada just to kind of land you in the right place. And then I'm going to talk about Parks Canada, where I work, and the Highways Avalanche Forecasting Program, the Public Regional Avalanche Forecasting Program, and then the Search and Rescue Program that we have. And I'm going to finish with a case study. It's gripping. It's the story of Howe's Peak and the search and the recovery of Hans-Jörg Auer, David Lama, and Jess Roskelley. So it's a sad ending in a sense, but it's quite a story, and I feel I should tell it to you here, especially because I'm speaking to Austria, which is the hometown of two of those folks. So that's how we'll finish, and it should take about 45 minutes to run you through this. I would say for also, I'm speaking in English. I hope I'll try to speak slowly. I hope everyone can stay with me a little bit. I typically speak quite quickly, so I've made myself a little note so I can keep reminding myself to slow down. And now let's get going. So I'm going to start with the first few slides just to kind of line you up with where I'm talking here, Western Canada. Canada is a huge country. If you've never been here before, it's five and a half thousand kilometers wide, and almost all of the mountains are in the western side of the country here. And so this is the area that we're going to be speaking about, and this is where I do most of my work in this part of Western Canada. When we sort of begin to scale down, we end up in the provinces, the Western Canadian provinces of British Columbia and Alberta. And in sort of the broad scale, we have two big ranges. We have the coast and the interior ranges of mountains. And our weather typically comes from here, right off the Pacific Ocean. So out here is very deep snowpack, very, very deep, very strong and wet maritime snowpack. In here is the best blend of dry and deep. And over here is shallow and dry, and it's on the sort of the furthest side of the weather. Continuing to scale down, and here, if you've been there, there is Vancouver on the lower left. There is Calgary on the right. It's 1,000 kilometers of driving between the two through all these mountains. Anyone who comes from Europe, usually the first thing they observe is how far we drive in Canada. We do a lot of driving, and it's just no problem to drive 5 hours to get somewhere. We do it all the time. More specifically, the interior mountain ranges. So this is the mountain ranges where I work mostly. Up in the north, we have the Caribou Mountains. Below that is the Monashee Mountains. Here is the Selkirk Mountains. And down there is the Purcell Mountains. And all of those are called the interior ranges. And that's where the famous heli skiing happens. So if you're coming skiing in Canada and you want to ski our famous Deep Powder, you want to go to the Selkirks or the Monashees or the Caribous. And the town of Revelstoke is right about here in between the two of them. And so this is deep snow country. And Rogers Pass is right here. And it's the highest point of the highway across the Selkirks, and Rogers Pass is quite well known for its avalanche control program. And then furthest east is the Canadian Rockies, and this is where I work, and the rest of today's talk will happen in the Canadian Rockies. And these are big mountains. Well, for us, they're big. Our highest mountain is just under 4,000 meters. And it's a big range. It's a very dry range. We have lots of old snow, faceted depth hoar on the ground. That's very common around here. We also have these national parks. So these are kind of a gem in Canada. These are large protected areas with very little development. Um, we call these ones, there's about 50 national parks across the country. These 7 mountain national parks are 22,000 kilometers, and you can see the names of them there. So they all happen in the interior ranges and on the Rockies. And then where I work is Banff, Yoho, and Kootenay National Parks. So this is where we're going to scale down to today for the rest of the talk. It's 9,360 square kilometers, 3 national parks, and it's a busy place. I live in Canmore, Alberta, and just 20 kilometers down the road from me is Banff, Alberta, which is a very busy place with tourists. Lots of stuff going on here, lots of people. And I work for the national park in a department called Visitor Safety. And the Visitor Safety group I'm in is responsible for the highway avalanche control, the public avalanche bulletins, and the search and rescue in those 3 parks. So any medical emergency or any kind of emergency response that is not on the highway where an ambulance can go is our responsibility. And I'll tell you a bit more about that later. So I work with a group of 10 mountain guides, avalanche forecasters. Sort of, we do the same, both those jobs. And we have 1 dog master who we use for searching, and he helps with law enforcement as well. Our group, the credentials to work in our group are to be a professional member of the Canadian Avalanche Association, which I've been a member of now for 33 years. It's a long time. And that's actually one reason why I was excited to speak to you today at the Austrian Association, because I just say that the Canadian version of this has been a really important influence on my career development and my ability to collaborate and learn from peers. It's really been a great thing. We're also all mountain guides. That's the sort of the credential to work in this operation here. In terms of our avalanche training, this is what this is maybe a little bit unique about Canada. Everyone who works with avalanches in Canada is trained the same way. So here's the training flow on the right, but so all of us who are mountain guides have had to do this. This whole stream here takes about 4 years, 5 years, maybe 4 or 5 years, and it's expensive. But this is the process. Any of the jobs that you get in Canada, you have to have these qualifications to work. And this is the same for anyone who does site-specific forecasting for a highway, anyone who does public avalanche forecasting, who works as a ski patroller at a ski resort. Anybody who works with avalanches operationally has these credentials in Canada. And that has been very important to us because it means that we can communicate with each other speaking exactly the same language. So when I speak to, or I get information from someone who's heli skiing or someone who is doing highway avalanche forecasting, it's all the same language, and I know exactly what they're talking about, and they understand me. So it's been very, probably the best part about being part of the Canadian Avalanche Association is this standardized training scheme we've had now for almost 40 years. So I want to take you through sort of our basic avalanche forecasting process. So this should look familiar, I think, to anyone here who's forecasting avalanches, but this is where I work in Banff, we've kind of created our own, what we would call workflow. And we use this thing called the InfoX, which is short for information exchange. This is also a product of the Canadian Avalanche Association, and we subscribe to this along with 150 other operations in Western Canada. Everybody who works with avalanches subscribes to this system and uses this method. So this is why we're able to communicate between each other, and that's very helpful. And I'm just going to run you through kind of a standard morning forecaster meeting here. So we do this in our group every day at 8 o'clock in the morning, and it takes us about between 30 minutes and 1 hour. It depends. Every heli ski operation does this. Every highway does this in Canada. Every guiding group, ski area, this is sort of the way. But everybody can develop it in their own specific way. So this is how we do it in Banff National Park. And we start with our typical context of who's working today. And, you know, you can see on the screen there a list of names. We go through snow and weather data that came in overnight, so we can look at the remote weather stations, and we look at any snowpack data that's come in. We're starting to use a little bit of modeling now, any of the snow profile work from the day before. Then we move to look at avalanche activity. And so those two, snow and weather data and avalanche activity, when we use this system, we can see what all 150 other operations saw yesterday. So very useful because I can immediately see who saw avalanches where. It's really, really good data. And this is kind of the core feed of data that makes the public avalanche forecasts in Western Canada. The Canadian Avalanche Canada produces avalanche bulletins for most of British Columbia, and they do it almost entirely from the data that comes from the InfoX. You know, there's probably 50 heli-ski operators on here every day, so you can always see what's going on. It's very interesting. We take a look at the field trip reports from our teams yesterday, and in our park we have 3 large ski resorts. Each of those resorts has an avalanche control team, so we look at what happened yesterday with them. And then we take a look at the weather forecast. So now we're switching from the data we collected and the data we've seen up till now, and now we switch to forecasting. And so we're looking ahead at what's happening in the next 24 to 48 hours. We note our snowpack description, which is usually a fairly basic paragraph summary of the type of snowpack we have. One thing we do here is we track weak layers. So every persistent weak layer is given a name and a date when it's buried. So, for example, we may have the Christmas surface hoar layer, and there's a whole system in here for tracking it, and we will update that every day, and we can watch our colleagues update the same layer. And it's interesting because you can see the same layer, you can watch it evolve across Western Canada every day when you're seeing it all through all the other operations. So the snowpack description and weak layer tracking is a very important part of this for us. Then we get to the avalanche hazard assessment, the danger assessment, and I'm going to talk about that in a bit more detail here in just a second. Then we move to something called terrain coding. So if you're a heli-ski company, what you do here is you go through all your heli-ski runs and you decide whether they're green, yellow, or red for the day. And you do this as a team. And this is, many of us think this is the most important part of our meeting. It's kind of where our avalanche hazard assessment hits the ground. And we're taking a look at the terrain that people will be in today, and we're deciding whether it's open, closed, or if it's yellow, then it has some conditions on it. Now, where we work, we don't actually close runs because it's public national park. So for us, this is workplace safety. We go through the different field trips that we would do each day, and we decide what's available and what's not. Then we move to our highways, and we go through our highway avalanche program, and we come up with a forecast and some rating levels for the highway. And then we kind of wrap it up, and we come up with our plan for the day. So that is how we forecast avalanches pretty much every single day. And there's different versions of that done at all different places in Western Canada, but all of us follow a very similar type of method. These 2 parts here, avalanche hazard assessment, just to dive a little deeper for a minute here. This is how we take a look at avalanche problems. As you can, I started this just for the talk here. You can see I've created a wind slab problem. It's on northwest aspects at tree line and in the alpine. There's no persistent weak layer involved. It's isolated in its distribution. It's reactive, so that means we can trigger it pretty easily. We can definitely get it to go on skis. Typical size is 2. And this is kind of how it all comes together. You can see we call this the hazard chart on the right, but you can see the center dot there is the center points, and then that square is the ranges. So we can see that we expect size 1.5 to size 3 avalanches, and they're ranging from almost unlikely to likely. And so we do that for each avalanche problem. And then ultimately, we come up with a rating. So here we only have 1 problem because I just made this yesterday. But you can see that we've got in the alpine, we have the wind slab, and it's danger level 2. Same at tree line, alpine, and danger level 2. And then below tree line, we have no problems down there and danger level 1. And this is terrain coding. I just have one sheet to show you this. We have in our area probably about 100 different terrain trips that we go through, but you can see the names on the left, and each of these comes up with a photo, and very useful because each day we go through them. Usually it's pretty fast. We agree on almost all runs, and then usually there's 3 or 4 where we stop and we don't all agree. We get on here, we discuss this particular roll right here because that's a bad place. We talk about the overhead hazard in this place, and we really dig into the terrain itself, and then we make a decision. And in this case, this one here went red. So that's the daily meeting, and then from that we move into our different kind of operational stuff. So we'll start with the highway avalanche control program in our park. This again another map, but here you can. This is basically our area. These are the roads that we deal with in our park, and these are the different areas where avalanches hit the road. We have in the park 350 kilometers of roads. We have a railway. It's a really important artery for Canada, so a lot of economic reliance on the railway and the highway. That's Canada's #1 highway. So closing it down is very expensive, and nobody's happy when it's closed. We have about 50 avalanche paths. We have some GAZEX and some Wiesen. We have 12 weather stations that we use, and we have three ski areas, each with avalanche teams. Here's just some pictures, just some examples of some of our highway paths. This is Mount Bosworth, which hits the Trans-Canada Highway. Bosworth 3, 4, and 5 are all equipped with GAZEX. And you can see our weather station just up. We actually have 2 weather stations. Typically, we keep a weather station at tree line where we can monitor snow, and then we have one at the ridge crest so we can watch the wind. And this is sort of a view down from the top of Bosworth 5, looking down at the GAZEX horn. This is Mount Stephen, which is a difficult place for us. We've got infrastructure at the bottom. You can see we have a big dike down there and a catchment basin. The railroad goes through there. The highway goes through here. This is a 2,000-meter avalanche path. These are our helicopter bombing targets. And maybe what makes this so complicated is this is a glacier here. And twice so far, I have been called out at 2 in the morning with glacier ice on the highway here and vehicles involved. So this makes it difficult because we can't forecast for the glacier. Recently, we've put a bigger berm in here, and it seems to have stopped the glacier from hitting the highway, so provides us with some relief. This is how Mount Stephen looks at the top, and now we have Wiesen towers. These spots are where we have 3 Wiesen towers up here, which makes avalanche control a lot easier. We sometimes still helicopter bomb up here, but it's 3,200 meters elevation, so it's difficult with the helicopter at that elevation. This is the notification system and the rating system we use for our roads. So this is different than the danger scale. Kind of the same concept. We give a rating for each of our sections of roads, but this is more of a risk rating, and it's focused on the actual what's happening at the highway, not so much the start zone elevation. So you can see here, it really is. And this is for our highway maintenance crews and other staff. And the public, actually. It's a status of the road. The road is open, the road is closed, or it's open with conditions. And those conditions are things like they have to consult with us for any stationary work, avalanche transceivers required for all work. And here we talk a little bit about what we expect to reach the road. So we do that for each of our 5 areas each day. And here's just an example from last year of some of the tracking. Here you can see this is February 19th through till March 5th. These are our 5 regions, and you can see this is an avalanche cycle. So you can see how we start. Usually we start at Sunshine, that's typical. This is the Trans-Canada Highway Yoho, and you can see we did 3 days of avalanche control there. This one was closed the longest. It's a small road. So this is how we track it, and this is kind of the rating system that we use for our roads. Okay, I'm going to move to the public avalanche forecasting part of the job. And I should say that each day we have 3 people scheduled to work on the public forecasting program, and we have 1 person scheduled to lead the highway program, and we are always jumping back and forth depending on where the priority is. We do our public avalanche forecasting program with a lot of support from Avalanche Canada. They provide us the software that we use to produce our avalanche forecast, but we develop the actual content ourselves in the park. So this is our region. Lots of jokes we've had about what we think this looks like. Some think it looks like a space shuttle. Some think it looks like a cat. We're not really sure what shape, but this is the shape of our public avalanche forecasts. There's 9 subregions in here. You can just see the boundaries there. So we have the ability to break this apart into different sections each day. As an example here, you can see this is a test for Austria. I made this. So this would be when we have a higher danger on the west side than we do on the east side, we would break it apart like that. So we kind of like a jigsaw puzzle. We can make that each day. Our forecasts are hosted on the Avalanche Canada website. Everybody's on the same avalanche.ca website. That's a big stretch of land there, 1,500 kilometers the whole way. Avalanche Canada is famous for its enormous forecasting regions. You can see ours is smaller. That's us there. But some of these areas to the west, like the North Columbia, Northern Rockies, these are enormous forecast areas that Avalanche Canada attempts to get data for, which is difficult. I feel like where we work, we have a lot of data because it's a busy park with 3 ski areas, lots of people skiing and climbing, and we have a lot of information coming in. And we have a team in the field every day. Every day we have a field trip team, sometimes 2, out ski touring or climbing and collecting data that contributes to the program. This is what our forecast looks like on the web. As you scroll down, you can see in this case, we've broken out, this is what we would call Little Yoho. We've broken that region out for some reason. And we have really 3 sections. We have the danger rating section of the forecast. So we have a headline and the danger ratings. Conditions look pretty good here. This is last year in February. We have the avalanche problems. And here, you can see here we have an alpine. We have a wind slab in the alpine on all aspects. It's unlikely to size 2. And so we may have anywhere between 1 and 3 problems, or 0 occasionally. And then finally, we have a short but more detailed description, avalanche activity summary, the snowpack description, and then the weather forecast. And that's the content of our public avalanche forecasting. And let's move to the search and rescue program here, sort of the 3rd leg of what we do. We receive approximately 350 calls per year, and we respond to about half of those. We routinely get calls where we're busy doing research and eliminating the response. We had 2 of them yesterday where we don't have to actually go. If someone calls for help, but we realized that eventually they didn't need help. This is becoming more and more the case with the satellite messaging and now the iPhone emergency service. So we respond to all kinds of emergencies in our park. Medical emergencies. We do lots and lots of overdue missing people. We do a lot of helicopter sling rescue. We typically do between 75 and 100 helicopter sling rescues per year, sometimes called a short haul. We do rock rescue, waterfall ice climbing rescue in winter, avalanche rescue, which we train and do a lot of in the winter. We don't fortunately do a lot of rescues, but we do usually several every winter, and we're busy training for them a lot. And we also work in the rivers in the summer doing swift water rescue. We work really closely with the helicopter pilots and paramedics. That's kind of the group. We get them off the mountain with the pilots, and then we transfer them to the paramedics. Our group is not paramedics. We're trained to kind of an advanced first aid standard, and then we transfer to the medical teams in the helicopters, which take people to the hospital. In terms of avalanche fatalities, just in our park. So we have some interesting statistics inside our park, and they're different than just about everywhere else. Um, this is this actually doesn't include we had one fatality last winter, and it's not in this data. So this is up till last winter, I guess. You can see the distribution here of the kinds of people who are getting killed in avalanches in our park. And I think to me, what stands out is the climbers here. That's a lot of climbers compared to most places. And that's obviously because we have a lot of climbing here. This is a real destination for winter climbing. And that's reflected in another interesting statistic, which is the trigger type. So if you look at the skiers, you can see that 90% of the skiers triggered the avalanche themselves. So they skied through a starting zone and triggered it and were buried. And if you contrast that with the climbers, only 3 of them triggered it themselves. The remainder was hit from above. So overhead hazard. Oftentimes, a long way overhead has come down and hit them while they were climbing. And the same for the snowshoers, actually. We have, the number of them are getting hit from above. So it's an interesting statistic. When you take a look at the totals over here, 60% of our avalanche fatalities, people trigger it themselves, but 40% of the people who get killed in avalanches in our park have been hit from above. And that's, I don't think I've seen a statistic like that in anywhere else. Usually it's always the skier who triggers the avalanche themselves. And that is most common here, but we have a bit of a different problem with all this overhead hazard. Okay, I'm going to shift gears here. Kind of describe to you the 3 legs of our program here. That's the highway avalanche forecasting, the public avalanche forecasting, and the search and rescue. And now I'd like to do a case study, which might hit close to home for anyone in your hometown. I know that both Hans-Jörg Auer and David Lama were Austrian, and I hope that everyone who's watching this, if there's any close friends, I hope you're okay watching this. Feel free to tune out if it's bothering you. I'm going to tell you a little bit about this. I was very involved with this from day one, and it's a sad story. I think if you probably know the ending already, but I'm going to run you through the rescue operation, which is a really, I think, a fascinating story. Every time I tell this story, I can't believe I was actually part of this, but this is the search and recovery operation that happened between April 17th and 21 in 2019. So that's 5 years ago now. So this is Howes Peak. And this red line is the northeast buttress of Howes Peak, which is the most common summer way to climb this mountain. And that gets climbed several times per summer. It's a big climb. It's a 2,000-meter rock climb, 30 pitches of rock climbing. Most people spend 2 nights out to climb that thing. One of the most popular routes. This is the North Face, which has been climbed once. This is the East Face and a route called M16, which was done over 5 days in 1999, and that's going to be part of the story I'm going to tell you in a minute here. This is a version called House of Cards, which was done in 3 days. And over here is a waterfall climb that does not go to the summit, and it's called Life by the Drop. So that's what Howes Peak looks like, and those are the common routes on Howes Peak as of the beginning of April 2019. Howes Peak is 60 kilometers northwest of Lake Louise. So down here is Lake Louise, and that's what I was describing to you before. Lake Louise is right in the middle of our forecasting area. And then, a 30-minute drive north, and you're looking at Howes Peak. Very beautiful spot, very visible from the highway. Everybody stops to take pictures. It's quite striking. So the first thing that happened was on the morning of April 17th, we received a phone call from the father of Jess Ruskelly. This is John Ruskelly. He's a well-known American alpine climber, to tell us that these guys had not checked in with their inReaches. And we get quite a few calls about people who have not checked in with an inReach, and oftentimes we don't respond to that right away because, just because someone doesn't send a text is not a reason to launch a rescue on its own. But this was different because we knew where they were, Howes Peak, and they were also professionals working for the North Face. and reliable in a sense that they are going to send. If they missed their in-reach call, we knew something was wrong. So we launched immediately and found their car in the parking lot and began to search all around the east face. The only information we had is that they'd been going up to climb M16. That's all we knew. We know they're up there somewhere. By the end of the day, we'd located three things. We'd located their tent. You can see on the left there, their skis and poles partway up the face, and we found a shadowed, there was a shadow over far to the left of where we were searching. And I was in the helicopter for the second search. And when I switched with my partner, he said, we have poor visibility, but I think I see a shadow. See if you can get close to the shadow. And then I flew in there and was able to get really close to the shadow and confirm that there was at least two people there. But could not tell if there was three, but we found two people there, clearly deceased. But we could not get to them. The weather was poor. And this is how the day ended. You can see the tent at the bottom, the skis and poles indicating where they had actually left them on the climb up. And this is the location of where we found two of the subjects. We still could not confirm a third. So at this point, we were quite concerned there was a third person up there somewhere. We really didn't know. So this is a funny time for us in rescue. We usually operate in a small group. Most rescues involve 2 or 3 of us plus the pilot, and we usually get the job done in 2 hours, and then we're back. But this is different. We knew we had a big job to get these guys out of their very, very exposed location above underneath that huge face. None of these guys were wearing Avalanche transceivers, unfortunately, so we actually threw a transceiver out the door of the helicopter attached to a rock and tried to hit them so we could find them later. We marked the spot with a GPS, and we also threw out, believe it or not, some highway cones, orange cones from the highway. We knew we were not going to be able to find them if we didn't mark the spot. So we knew we were going to be, and the weather forecast was poor. So we knew we had a bit of a job in front of us for a few days, and we also knew these guys were famous climbers. And as soon as the word was out, what had happened here, the media was going to be all over this. And so we returned back to Lake Louise. At this point, there's like 3 or 4 of us who know what's going on. And that's when we activate the bigger Parks Canada machine. And I work as part of a large, 5,000 people work for Parks Canada across the country. And where I work, we have media and communications. We have a wildfire suppression group. We have a wildlife team. All of these people are trained in emergency response. So we bring everyone together to work on the larger events. The first thing we do is begin to draw up a chart of what it's going to look like. We have incident command, the operations, which is the group that I will work in. That's where we do the actual rescue on the ground. We have the planning department, and we have logistics. And you can see here, media and communications, we have an information officer and then someone helping, and then we have someone else. There's 3 of them involved there, and you'll see how important that was in just a few minutes. One thing we did on this response, which was the first time we'd done this, and it really was great, we've been working a lot on our mental health program. As rescuers, we see a lot of difficult things. And so this time we decided to embed critical incident stress management into this operation. So usually the way we would do it is after the event is over, we would have a debrief. But this time we thought, well, we're going to be here for a few days. Let's bring a counselor in and have them join our team. So we had a psychologist join the group, join our meetings, and be present for the whole operation, and it was excellent. I would highly recommend that to anybody who's involved in a big operation. Don't wait till the end. Get someone there. It was really helpful. I think all the staff appreciated it. This is just some kind of look at some of the planning that we're doing here. You can see on the left the different strike teams and each objective. This is following the ICS structure. And then there's this part. So this is one of the most difficult things I think that we deal with in our group, and we've been through this enough now that I know every time we have to do this, it's going to be hard. We have to decide whether we're going to go there or not, and how we're going to go there. because as you can see, that's a pretty exposed place, and we don't want to take too much additional risk for ourselves, but we have to get the job done. We've been through this enough to know that it's always difficult because ultimately it comes down to individual risk tolerances between rescuers. I mean, we can have all the rules we want, all the benchmarks, but in the end, it's three or four of us sitting in a room looking at each other and saying, yes, I'm comfortable going in there, and someone else saying, no, I'm not, and then having to kind of find the answer. And it's never easy. This is never easy. In fact, anyone who was at the ISSW last week in Norway, there was a woman who did a presentation on saying no, rescuers saying no. And I thought it was a really interesting presentation. If anyone listening was there, this is what I'm speaking about. We don't always say yes. So last winter, I had to wait for 4 hours directly under a slope where somebody was seriously injured, but we just could not ski tour up the slope to get them. So anyway, with this particular situation, we really have two choices. That we can either carpet bomb it, which we have done. I've been to several recoveries where we've covered the subjects with meters of more snow. I mean, they're deceased already anyway. But this is just too complicated. Like, you take a look at that and you think, what am I doing here? This doesn't make much sense. So the other option then is no avalanche control, and to just do it with a forecasting. So, that's things like, we think it may have slid already. We'll go when it's cold, these sorts of things to try and minimize the risk for ourselves. But none of us want to go down there and work on that slope without some kind of protection. These are the different tactics that we come up with in terms of how we're going to actually do the rescue. You don't have to read them all, except to say that this is the one we choose. No avalanche control. We're going to sling one person into the site, and then the key is that person's going to stay on the line. And you'll see in just a minute here what I mean by that. Usually when we sling in on the helicopter, we unclip from the line, and then the helicopter leaves and we can work. But in this case, we didn't want to unclip from the line in case another avalanche came down. So we had to develop a system to work probing and searching while we were still attached to the helicopter. And I'm going to tell you about that in just a second here. But essentially, we're going to send in one person, investigate, place a beacon on the subjects, and return to our staging area. Then we know where they are. Once we know where they are, then we can estimate a timeline and plan tactics to extract the people out of there. There's our question. People on site unclipped from the line. That's our question. Are we comfortable with that? And then sling the group out and extract everybody. You can see our timelines on the right. Sort of plan this whole thing out, how this is going to roll. So we're doing all that, and on the second day, this is the planning that's going on in the background. On the second day, the weather was terrible. These are my pictures. I tried to fly in there that day. I couldn't get it close. It was too windy. So we spent that day doing all this planning, and we have a large work group in the operations base at this point, and they are doing a whole bunch of planning work, including closing the area down. We don't want interference from anyone else, so this is a NOTAM, which is a notice to airmen, which is airspace. So we have closed down the airspace there so that nobody else can fly a helicopter in there. We have had experience with media flying helicopters into rescue sites, and because these guys were so well known, we just didn't want any interference. Here we also closed the area down. Because we're a land manager, the national park, we are responsible for the land, and we have a whole law enforcement group has the authority to do this. So we put an area closure in so that nobody was going to come walking up there. And then we put a no stopping on the highway, and we had law enforcement patrolling that, and we did not want people stopping and using binoculars and watching. So we basically isolated the whole place. And on day 2, the news broke. And I will just say before describing this, one thing that was a real challenge for us is that, the climbing community, mountaineering community internationally is still a small community. And so, of course, our cell phones were just binging like crazy. And I had Austrian numbers, I had American numbers, and I didn't answer any of them. We just couldn't do it. And my partners were having the same experience. All of our, everybody knows somebody who has a phone number. So that was interesting. We had to sort of isolate ourselves from everybody else for about a week and work on this and let our media team deal with this stuff. We had 1,000 media hits. We hosted a news conference, which is a way to do it. We had 2 news conferences where we invite the media to attend and we answer questions. I'm not involved in any of that, unfortunately. Fortunately, we have another group that looks after that. By day 3, it was snowing heavily. There's no going out. We didn't even go out that day. Overcast and snowing, 40 centimeters of new snow. The winds are blowing 30, but they're gusting 80, but it's going to clear. We can see it on the forecast. It's going to clear overnight, so we're going to try and get in there first thing on Saturday morning. But the problem is this is within just a few hours of the storm ending, so the avalanche danger is high. This is Easter weekend. So here's our chart. This is how we've organized ourselves. When it looks like we're going to get some good weather to go in there, you can see we've changed around the incident command here. There's our information officers at the top. This is the operations team on this side. I just want to point out, I don't think they're on here, various strike teams. We had a strike team dedicated to the rest of the park because it's Easter weekend. The park is busy. We can't put everybody on Howe's Peak because we know that there's probably going to be some other kind of accident. So we have a second team that's back at the office and they're going to respond to everything else in the park. And that's going to come into play here in a minute. Saturday morning, so here we go. Beautiful weather. Just stopped snowing hours earlier. It has just stopped snowing and we're up really early and out the door and in the helicopter. This is Howe's Peak out the window as we approach. That was the biggest avalanche cycle of the season. So that morning, as I was in the helicopter flying up there, there was fracture lines in size 3 avalanches everywhere, 1 to 150 centimeter fractures everywhere. It was just widespread avalanche activity. So I was skeptical that we were going to be able to do this rescue, but nevertheless, we're going to get in there and give it a try and hope that it's avalanched already. Our first job is to fly the whole mountain and see if there's another person up there still, because we still don't know where the third person is. So here's a video of our first flyby of the face. And there's no sound, unfortunately, but you'll be able to see what Howe's Peak looks like. So it's a big place. Our first job is to set up a staging area. Here you can see us on a moraine. Great spot. Nice piece of high ground so we can't get hit by any avalanches, and that's where we established ourselves. That's our spot looking across at Howe's Peak, trying to figure out how we're actually going to get in there. Lots of avalanche debris. All our markings were gone. Everything was covered over, and there was avalanche debris everywhere. So we were feeling pretty good that it had already avalanched. This is the team. I would say for us, this was like the lead up the week before this. There's so much to do in the office and there's media and there's pressure and decisions to be made. And now finally there's 6 of us, I guess 7 with me and our dog. We have a dog there too. And it's just us, nobody else, just us. And it is a good feeling to be away from all that other stuff. We can leave that back in the office and just concentrate on what we do best here and try and get these guys out of there. That's the spot where we have to get them. You can see a helicopter hovering above what we think is the area where they are. We have a GPS coordinate, but we can't see anything underneath it. We timed an avalanche adjacent to us. This picture is just to the left of Howe's Peak, and we were able to time it. It took 30 seconds to reach the bottom, which let us know that we have at least 20 seconds to get out of the way. And because, as I told you earlier, we're going to work while clipped into the line of the helicopter, that's actually a lot of time. If I ask the pilot to lift me up, I'll be in the air in about 2 seconds. So We're not really worried. We have a good backup system here. Interestingly enough, we went and watched a video from ICAR, from the Swiss, who had given some instructions on how to work on the line. And that was very helpful for us just to see the techniques they'd used in Switzerland. We had done a bit of training on this, but we never used it operationally. So this is kind of the things that we worked with here. We had a spotter. That was my job. I sat there with the binoculars and I spotted. We had a timer, the pilot maximum 20 minutes of hover time, and then we'll pull back. So the first mission, we put a rescuer in there and we couldn't find anything. He spent 20 minutes probing, walking around, and no find. And then all of a sudden the light went flat and we couldn't see anything anymore. So we had to decide we got to go. We just can't do the searching anymore because the light was flat. Just as we were wrapping up, we got another call. It was an in-reach activation, 2 activations, which when we get it twice, we know something's happening. And we were only 10 minutes away. So we quickly reconfigured, hopped in our helicopter and launched for the south, came around the corner and saw an enormous avalanche. That's probably a size 3.5 on the right. Right here, we arrive and they're in a crevasse, just above a crevasse, and CPR is in progress on one person. And this is 3,600 meters elevation, and it's starting to lose the weather and windy, so it's tricky. We ended up, that's me, I got put out right there, and then our helicopter just towed into the snow. We basically just tossed the person in the back of the helicopter and did CPR in the back and flew straight to Lake Louise. And then I collected the leftover people and we flew back. And boom, there we were in Lake Louise. Unfortunately, the person did not survive. So a little bit heavy. And we had to take a deep breath and refocus on House Peak. And so we went back the next day, and this is the day. We've got really good weather, crisp blue sky. We know this is the day. We got to get them today. If we don't get them today, then we're going to have to wait a couple months for the snow to melt. So we did 2 more attempts with the probe, 1 person with a probe on the line, and we still couldn't find them. So we're getting frustrated. And we finally decided on our last attempt, we're going to put the dog in there. So this is really complicated because everybody has to be attached to the helicopter still. So we had to come up with a system to put the dog in there, where the dog was attached to the rescuer and the rescuer was attached to the helicopter, and nobody gets tangled. So this was a bit of a thing for us. And we did that. And I'm going to show you, this is the dog lifting for work. So I guess you can see the slide, but I'll tell you that I watched this. I was a spotter, so I had the binoculars on these guys. And Adam, our dog master, was just did an unbelievable job because he had to control the dog, he had to control the helicopter line, and he had his probe. And remember, our time limit was 20 minutes. And at 20 minutes, I called him off and said, "You guys got to come back. We're done." And the pilot said, "No, no. Not yet. The dog can see something. I can see it. I'm good. I'm going to hold it here. And within 2 minutes later, the dog ran uphill, just started digging like crazy, and boom, all three of them right there. So that was a huge moment for us of success. And of course, we were all high. It's terribly sad, but for us, high-fiving on the rescue site because we found them, thankfully. It was really something to watch. I think one of the most incredible things I've ever watched was watching Adam and Brooke do that recovery. And that was it. We were able to get in there and get all three of them out of there and bring this incident to a close. Because we had a counselor on site, we were able to do a critical incident stress debrief that evening, and it was all wrapped up. Um, so just to kind of bring this to a close, I guess, just to tell you, it wouldn't be right if I didn't tell you what happened after this. I spent the following year working with John Ross Skelly to try and figure out what actually happened up there. Um, we had these four photos. Jess Roskelly's iPhone survived the fall. So we had these four photos and they had geotags on them. Um, so I was able to take these photos and put them there. And plus we had their tent and their skis and poles. And so all of a sudden we could see where they climbed. And when I saw that, I realized that's not an established route. And of course, these guys being who they were, they're probably not going to climb an established route. John Roskelly made 3 trips to the bottom of Howe's Peak over the summer, and he collected all the equipment at the bottom, including Hans-Jorg's camera, David's GoPro, and John went through all that equipment, and he made timelines and a time sequence of all the photos. Um, I was also able to locate someone I know who witnessed an avalanche, and it probably was the avalanche that got them. And we had a time, he took a photo of it from the road, and we have a timestamp of that too. So in the end, we can go back now and we can look at these photos, and they're at 7 o'clock in the morning. There's Hans-Jorg on the first hard pitch, and at 12:45 they're on the summit. Like that is absolutely incredible timing. That's like out of this world. Like I said, the first ascent of that face took 5 days. So these guys really did live up to their reputation as the very best. Um, this is the last photo that we had, which we think is David Lama rappelling back off the ridge into the big slope to the left. Now we know where they climbed, so we think they've gone down. This is making sense because where we located them was not underneath the climbing route. It was underneath a different place, so we were confused all along as to where they actually climbed. But now we know where they climbed. This is our last photo, which is David rappelling. So they're descending down that big slope. And so we know what happened, basically. This is it. They climbed up that big snow slope to the summit, rappelled back down, and sometime between 1:27, which is the time of that last photo, and 1:58, which is the time of that avalanche. I have a timestamp on the photo. Sometime in there, they were swept away and killed. So it's a very, very sad story. And if anybody's friends with them, and I'm so sorry, this is always hard on everybody. Since gotten to know the families a little bit, and everybody's just comes to terms with it in their own way. I would say that this is a brilliant climbing route. It's named the King Line. This is where it goes, and the first ascent by those three guys on April 16th, 2019. So rest in peace, guys. And on that heavy note, I think it's time to wrap. Just kind of going to do a little summary here of the things I've covered for the last hour. And thanks for sticking with me for the hour. I know that's a little bit longer than usual, but it's hard to really shorten that Howe's Peak story, especially if I'm talking to the home country. So I've covered a few things today. I sort of talked a little bit about the Western Canadian mountains and how they fit together and where we work. Tried to introduce you quickly to the forecasting method that we use in Canada, which I think is interesting because we all do it in similar ways and communicate back and forth. Show you a little bit about our highway avalanche control program in the park, our public avalanche forecasting program, and then our search and rescue program in the park. This is a picture of Borjo 5, one of our avalanche paths. You can see the Gazex horn going off, and we also heli bomb in there, which is what must be happening there. So that's it. Thank you very much for the time. Again, I was really honored to speak to you all today about this. I hope you all learned something and enjoyed the talk, and have a great winter.
Thanks, Grant, for a very nice, interesting talk.
You're welcome.
So, thank you very much, Grant, for your excellent talk, your excellent presentation. Thanks for the deep insights you shared with us. I think both parts of your presentation, the operations and the site-specific story, were striking. I think for many of us here in the room, but also online, story, as you said, is sad and breathtaking because, as you also already mentioned, some of us were closely connected to at least two of the three-man party here. Tons of information, tons of things that we can discuss, and I would like now to invite you in the room, but also our participants online to ask questions to Grant. We would have planned for like 15 more minutes. I think, I hope this is okay for you, Grant. I know that you're busy. And as soon as you have to leave, just say, now it's enough, write me an email. And we will bombard you with emails. So we have a little bit of problems with our chat here in the Teams, but I see that Froni raised hand, and I ask you now, Froni, to open your mic and ask a question.
Don't be surprised, it's not Froni, it's me, Benedict. I just have the question, is Reco a thing that you use for rescues at the national parks? And would it be maybe a solution to find those guys quicker? Thank you.
Very good question. And yes, we train with Reco. We have Reco. We had Reco with us to respond to that. But we didn't use it in there. I don't think they had any Reco tabs in their clothing. We did once locate a subject, similar situation. It was on an ice climb called Polar Circus. They were missing for 4 days by the time we got there, and we found them with a Reco, and it hit the electronics on their headlamp, is what we think it did. We did not use it on Howe's Peak. We didn't have the helicopter Reco yet either at that point. This is 5 years ago. Now we have this heli detector that hangs under the machine, and I think that's probably would have been a pretty useful tool for a search like what we're doing here. So no, we didn't do it. I would say that what followed was a push to Reco, and like I work with Arc'teryx as well, and we really trying to get companies to put Reco chips, Reco tabs into climbing harnesses, to be honest with you. For some reason, climbers, they like going light, you know, and so they forsake the avalanche safety equipment that we traditionally carry. But still, I think a Reco tab would have been really useful here. And had we been better set up and had we known they had Reco tabs in there, that's probably a tool we would have used, but we didn't use it on this particular mission.
Okay, thank you.
So maybe there is one question in the room. If you have a question, just come forward to the mic and Rand will give you the answer.
Yeah.
State your name and where you're from.
Yeah, so my name is Bengt Honerland. I'm actually grew up on the South Coast, but I've been living in the Alps for the last 6 years. So I was just kind of more of a forecasting question, especially more about the challenges of the bigger regions that don't have as much data, and just what are some of the challenges with those regions, and how much of a reliance is it on recreational user feedback?
Good question. The question is, in a sense, better directed for Avalanche Canada. Like I say, I forecast for the smaller regions, but I think I can answer that. You know, Avalanche Canada has these large remote regions with very little data, and I know that they're struggling to get data. There's not much in the way of professional operations going on up there. So to your point, we've started something called the MIN, the Mountain Information Network, which I didn't actually mention here, but I should have. It's to do exactly what you're saying there. It's to have recreational users, anybody can submit information on the Mountain Information Network. And so it's like a public InfoX kind of thing. Really helpful. And I think the forecasters at Avalanche Canada get a lot of information from that. So, you know, some of those regions are big for snowmobiling. So there's tons of people out there on snowmobiles, but none of them are working in the industry with us. So if it wasn't for the MIN, we wouldn't get that information. So that system has been really important. And also Simon Horton, who is the research officer at Avalanche Canada, he works a lot on modeling. And so I think we're a little bit behind Europe in some ways, but we're really starting to catch up and use forecasting models and snowpack models more operationally than we ever have. And I think that's one of the big drivers for Avalanche Canada, is to try and get snowpack information in these remote areas where they otherwise would have nothing.
Okay, thanks.
Thanks, Grant. So there's another question from the room.
Hello, Grant. Tobias here. Thanks for the nice presentation. I was wondering about the kind of decision making on the days. You said you put a second team because you knew you were like, but what in case this team was occupied? You were kind of said you were already calling it a day when you got the InReach alarm. But had you discussed prior how you to react if you get something while on the operation, while still searching for the kind of dead bodies?
Good question. Well, we had a team ready to launch at any point. So to be honest with you, that second avalanche I told you about, they actually got the call first. So normally, well, nothing's really normal. We would have expected that the other team would have gone to that other avalanche and left us to work on House Peak. But two things happened there. First of all, we were just finished on House Peak. And even if we weren't finished, because we were looking for deceased people, I think we would have gone to the other one anyway. Plus, we were very close. We were 10 minutes away. We had everything with us because we were already doing an avalanche rescue. So I think it was just a number of factors that led us to just go and be there first. And in fact, the other team, they launched for it as well. And like I got left on the avalanche debris. We dropped me off on the debris. We picked up the person and doing CPR in the back of the helicopter and flew to Lake Louise, and they left me on the debris with two subjects. Then that other team of ours from Banff, they arrived, and that's who picked me up off the debris. So we sort of used both helicopters and both teams with that response.
Thanks, Grant. At the moment, I don't see any questions from the web, but still from the crowd.
One more here.
From the web, so we do the web question first. So, Anna Heuberger, please unmute yourself and ask your question.
Yes, hello. Thank you for the really interesting and nice presentation, Grant. One thing we were wondering is, you said you did a run list for your forecast. I didn't quite understand why Parks Canada does a run list, because you don't really have a ski area or a mechanized ski area to inform. So who is the run list for, and what does this run list forecast include?
Good question. You're absolutely right. When we make a run list, we actually call it a terrain list for us, because we don't have runs, and we don't open runs and close runs, and we're not guiding anybody. So for us, it's the run list is actually just for us, for the 10 of us working that day. It's like a workplace safety initiative. And it really helps us. So we follow the same process that they would use for helicopter skiing, which is an actual run list where they would decide where they're going to ski that day. Except ours is a terrain list. It's just for the 10 of us who are working that day. We would open and close. We have an excellent list of typical ski tours and climbs, along with photos and images of each one of them. So it allows us to take a look at, like, we would pick, let's say we pick the Bow Summit section of the there might be 10 runs in that area, 10 common ski tours, and we would look at each one of them and just decide how we felt about each one and open and close them. And honestly, we find it very useful, not just so we open or close things. I mean, that's kind of, I guess that's the rules part, but to have the terrain discussion following a hazard assessment is just so crucial. to be able to talk about, where we might see little wind slabs and we know these runs very well also, so we can talk intimately about the terrain and on the left side of that tree band, watch for this. And I think there's surface hoar over here, and don't forget about that gully over there and the cornice overhead. These kinds of conversations are really important for us. And we use, like when we get called to rescues, we have to do risk assessments, kind of quickly. So that's how we use it. It's for us, it's internal, but it follows the same process that a heli ski or a guiding company might use. And I would say a lot of the ski areas, they follow a similar process. They would open and close runs, but again, it's the same thing. You've finished with your hazard and your danger assessment, and now you scale it right down to the individual terrain itself, and you work on each piece.
Cool, thank you. I hand over to Paul.
Hi, Paul from Wissen. One question for the InfoX. When I get you right, this is just for the professionals of you, so not for the recreation. And can anybody see the data and the information from the other guys? Or is there a possibility to give this read-only rights to other persons or other institutions there?
The InfoX, you're right. First of all, you're right. It's a subscription service, and it's quite protected with confidentiality. Like I showed you, I'm allowed to show you what's in the Parks Canada stuff, which I just showed you on the screen, but I'm not allowed to show you anybody else's data. In order to access it as research, a lot of researchers would want to get this data, and it's possible to get it, but you have to get permission from the Canadian Avalanche Association, and they often have to get permission from the operation itself. So it's not that easy to get it. But if you're researching or you want to use the data, it's definitely available. You just have to go through the steps. And I would say that there's been lots of pressure for years and years from the public because they want to see it because it's the best data going. But it remains confidential, and that's because we want every operation to feel that they can disclose sensitive information on the InfoX. So if there's an avalanche accident today, I'm going to read all about it tomorrow morning. I'm going to get the details. I'm going to know where it was. I'm going to know what happened. And they just don't want that kind of information in the public. And the concern was that if the information was available to the public, all the operations would stop submitting, sensitive stuff. So it remains confidential and protected.
But for you as a professional or as a forecaster, do you see the data or the data of the other one? So from another operation, so that you can see what their risk assessment or hazard assessment was and how they deal with the situation?
Yes, definitely. That's the biggest benefit of the whole thing. So each day I have 150 other operations. I can see everything they've put in there. We've had to scale it down to I would say it's about 25 operations that are somewhat near where we are. We look at their stuff. But yeah, if you're a subscriber, you can see everything.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you, Grant. There are other questions here in the room and in the web. I will hand over first to the room to Chris and take the opportunity to thank, because I have to rush for my kids. I have to take them home. Paul will hand over and do the Q&A. Thanks again for your nice and deep presentation. Was really interesting and striking. All the best over to Canada, and see you soon. Bye.
Thanks, Chris. Have a good one. See you later. Thank you.
Hey, Grant, it's Chris. First of all, thank you for your nice talk. I guess it was very informational for all of us. I have a question regarding the tracking of the weak layers. So how exactly is that done? And do you have a spatial gridded view in some way implemented? So you have like the homogeneously spreaded weak layer in some way? So, or is it just like a point information?
Good question. You're describing my dream, actually, which is a spatial weak layer distribution map. We do have that a little bit. I think some of the modeling work that Simon Horton is doing gives us but it's pretty coarse, and it's not on InfoX. That's some of the Avalanche Canada models can give us a spatial distribution of a weak layer, but it's, like I say, it's coarse. InfoX is not spatially distributed. It's not viewable on a map. It's really just it's a description. September or December 12th surface hoar down this deep. Here's the test results on this layer, and that's really it. And so at any point in the winter, it's almost like just a spreadsheet of 3 to 5 weak layers and their status. And we do code each weak layer as either developing, active, dormant, or inactive. Each weak layer has a status, and then we track it. But my dream would be to see that on the 3D. I would love to be able to just see where the surface area is on the map. That would be probably one of the biggest developments I could even imagine in avalanche forecasting.
Yeah, I guess that's a good point. Thank you. I head over to Paul, and we have some questions online as well.
Yeah, I think Lucas Rastner, you are next. So unmute yourself, please, and ask the question.
Okay, thank you very much for your nice presentation. It was very interesting. I have just a very general question. What's exactly the difference between Avalanche Canada and Canadian Avalanche Association? Thank you and greetings.
Greetings. Good question. We have dealt with this for years. Canadian Avalanche Association is, I think, similar to your Austrian association. We are a group of people that work with snow and avalanches, and we have to be professional members. We pay dues, and we meet certain standards to belong. And so we're a group of working professionals and researchers. Whereas Avalanche Canada is a publicly funded public avalanche forecasting. They're responsible for putting out the public avalanche bulletins. And that's quite different. They receive millions of dollars in money from the Canadian government to operate. And so they're much bigger, and they encompass more people. They have memberships across the country from members of the public. But the CAA is a small members-only driven organization.
Perfect. Any questions from the audience here? Yeah. Bitte.
Da drauf drücken.
Thank
you very much for your presentation and also the deep insights in the accident. Do you in Canada, do you also work with kind of summaries for the public to just sum up how the winter has been until now, and which I think is a very important thing to have this idea. And we in Austria, I guess you will know, we have this blog which gives every week a summary, and this has become a very, very useful tool for many ski tourists, but also for professionals. Do you also have and work with that in Canada? Something similar like the blog we have here apart from the avalanche report? Or is this at such a big scale with such wide areas?
Avalanche Canada has a blog as well. They call it the Forecasters blog, and it's published, maybe once a month. There's an update on there. We have submitted occasionally to the blog. I agree with you. I think that's where some of the best information is. It's free flowing. And I know we're constrained with our avalanche bulletin because we have to translate it into French. And so the translation requirements, you can't just, tell a long story. So I think the blog is a really good way to go. Avalanche Canada is the one who hosts the blog, and we contribute to it sometimes, but they have a regular on there. They also have really good social media coming out of Avalanche Canada. They have a presence on certainly on Instagram and on Facebook. I bet you they're on TikTok as well. But they have whoever is their social media director does an excellent job. So they also have we do quite a bit of outreach as well. Like our group in Banff, we will attend 5 or 6 avalanche awareness nights for the public in different places. We also have avalanche awareness days. It's a weekend in January across Western Canada that's dedicated to avalanche awareness. And all the small towns in Western Canada usually host an event, and there's people coming, and sometimes we will come and speak and have, beacon clinics and things like that. So this is all the extra stuff outside the bulletin, and I agree with you. I think that's really important stuff and where people can really learn this more than just what's in the bulletin.
I the blog, the information, I was not more, I didn't think about the basic and the basic training of the public, but really in the forecast, the blog, maybe you can give even more details than in the forecast. And
Definitely.
this I think is really the big profit of this blog, at least in retrospect, but also to a certain degree, maybe in the forecast sense. And this, I think, is really, that's why I wonder whether this is possible also in Canada for such a big area to give this, because you have such a different situation in such a big place.
Yeah, we don't have like different blogs for different regions. We don't have that. We just have one blog out of Avalanche Canada. So it would be, one day it might be about the South Coast, the next day it might be about the Rockies, and then it might be about the Selkirk. So you're right in a sense that it's not scaled down and always about the same place. It's a big place, but I think you're right. Like that's really is where we can communicate in much more detail about the terrain and about where the snowpack is. And we're fairly constrained with the bulletins. And also, I think people really focus on the danger ratings on those bulletins. We hope they read everything else, but a lot of people just read the danger scale and then away they go.
Thank you very much.
Okay, so I think there are no more questions on the web. And so I can see no more in the room.
Dinner time.
Thanks a lot for your time, for giving us really some cool insights into Avalanche or the Canadian Avalanche Association and your operations in Parks Canada. Thanks so much. And yeah, we wish you a good start into the next season and hopefully not too much search and rescue operations.
Thank you. And again, thanks a lot for inviting me. That was an honor to speak to everyone. I hope you all have a great winter. See you next time.
Okay, and then we will switch to German für zwei weitere Ankündigungen noch.